Hello and welcome back to the Argyle CX UX for Retail Leadership Forum CX Success 2023. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Crystal Offit, Customer Experience Consultant with notable companies such as Tesla and Enjoy Technology with KO Consulting. We're excited to have Crystal and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled, Bring 'em Back Alive, Recovering from Negative CX. Crystal, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you for having us. I'm really looking forward to this extremely knowledgeable panel today on turning around negative customer experiences. So first off, let's begin and let's meet our panel. If we can introduce ourselves and just briefly describe your experience and background in CX. We'll kick it off with Heather.
Thanks, Crystal. It's great to be here. I'm Heather Gilbanks, CCXP. I actually am the editor of CXPA's Book of Knowledge, the executive editor. Was published this last October. If you were looking for a good resource on how to get started in CX, it's a great one. And I've also worked with some lesser known brands, as I joke, like GE and IBM.
Great, Heather. Thank you so much for joining. Van, would you like to go next and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Van Sedita. I've worked in CX and UX for well over 10 years, working with such companies as Capital One, Vanguard, and now at M&T Bank, in the role now of a service design lead, which is really fulfilling in an organization that truly cares about CX.
That's so great to hear. Thank you again for joining. Jason, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Jason Trader. I'm a UX professional with over a decade of experience transforming businesses' responsive applications. I have a diverse portfolio that spans across multiple sectors, including finance, real estate, education, hospitality, and digital media. I've worked with a range of companies such as CNBC, Publicis Group, CoStar Group, Stride Learning, STR, Hilton Worldwide, Gensler, Havas, National Geographic, and I'm also now the founder of Operator Agency.
Awesome. We have quite a diverse panel. Again, thank you all for joining. Well, let's just kick right into it. So we'll start this question off. Van, if you want to kick us off, what are some general guidelines for acting on negative customer feedback?
Well, I think the first thing I think of is that it's not really, the more negative you may think of something, or we may think of something, it's really a bigger opportunity, as we often hear. And I think that if you, as a CX professional, dive into that feedback, see the quantitative metrics behind it, talk to the people one-on-one and not just over the phone in a short 5 minutes, you can really dive into qualitatively what bothered them and be able to quicker get to things like root causes. And they may even have some ideas as to how to fix the certain thing that went wrong for them.
Awesome. I like that. Definitely getting to the root cause. Jason, would you like to add on to this?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap between customer experience and user experience, especially when it comes to the research side and defining guidelines. So a lot of it just comes down to listening to their feedback and then figuring out and having a built-in process to analyze and prioritize it. And then from that, you can develop like a plan of action to actually execute and experiment and kind of build solutions to those problems. And then you have to test them and then continuously monitor. Kind of monitor the result sets, and you live between those last three steps where you are constantly kind of experimenting, testing, and then re-employing.
Thank you so much. I definitely align on that testing aspect. Heather, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is you've got to act. there are so many organizations that simply ask the question, and when there is negative feedback, they don't actually take action. Both Gartner and Forrester have research out that indicates that the vast majority of companies are really frustrating their companies or their customers by asking these questions and then not doing anything, or apparently not doing anything about it. So if you are acting, it's really critical to tell people what you did, and to preferably even validate that what you did actually solved their problem.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. I like that. I'm going to make that a bumper sticker. Don't just ask, you have to act. Great. Well, interestingly enough, Van actually talked about root causes. And so the next question here is, how can we actually find the root causes of a negative customer experience? Jason, would you like to kick us off on this one?
Yes, most definitely. So there's a lot of tools and a lot of techniques to find the root causes. There are some that are process driven, where you can get into the root causes from the actual product that you're using. And there are some that stem from the infrastructure of the company that you're working at. So for example, as some of the companies that I worked at, there was problems such as micromanagement, lack of delegation, and poorly built processes and teams, which if you have that, it's really difficult to actually employ some of these techniques, but that's a different kind of metric to watch. But you could use stuff like customer journey mapping, user testing, feedback analysis, doing direct interviews with your customers. You could do heat maps, and if you have analytics for pre-existing products, then that kind of gives you the data to validate any of those root causes. Now, it just depends on, like, for me as a freelancer and sometimes full-time, I get into the product at different phases of our production. So I have to know and be able to pretty quickly identify what those root causes are, because it's on me to build to build out the solution that's going to fix it.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I'm sure at each different phase, you've got different techniques, as you mentioned, for figuring out those root causes. Heather, would you like to add anything here?
Yeah, from my Lean Six Sigma background, I totally agree with everything Jason said. But one of my favorite tools is what they call an Ishikawa, or a fishbone diagram. And one of the things I like about that tool is that it actually looks at 8 different potential areas of root causes. So several of the ones that Jason mentioned are huge. So I just wanted to mention that if people are not familiar with it, you can download it free off of umpteen sites on the internet. It's called Ishikawa, or fishbone diagram.
Awesome. I love that takeaway. I'm definitely going to be looking more into that. Van, anything that you'd like to add?
I'll give a +1 to the fishbone diagram. I've used it once or twice. It's really great. It's such a structured way of brainstorming, and it helps.
Awesome. Thank you. And we do have a question from the audience here. I think this ties into Jason's answer. Are there tools to track the root causes and resolutions of negative CX?
Definitely. There's lots of different tools that you can use. Many of the most popular survey platforms do that. In fact, I would say most of them do. You may also have other tools within your IT infrastructure if you're an internal person. CRMs can often do this. ERP systems sometimes can do it. You might have an IT ticketing system that you could piggyback off of. There are so many ways to track root causes and resolutions, but that is really, really critical, because one of the things that I was going to talk about actually in our next question is continuous improvement. And when you have many times people think that something is a one-off, but if it happens dozens or hundreds of times, you really need to know that. So it's really important to track those root causes so that you can bucketize them over time. And if you don't have a good system to do that, I mean, you can even do it in Excel. It doesn't have to be super fancy, but most tools that are out there that you're probably already paying for, chances are you've got at least 3 different ways to do it today.
Awesome. Definitely agree. No matter how you're tracking, do it early and often. Van or Jason, do you have anything to add to the audience question?
I like keeping it as simple as possible. There are definitely tools out there, but keeping it in Excel or keeping it someplace where everybody can share it and talk about it and potentially develop research plans off of it and solutions. The more public within the company, of course, the better. I think that democratizing this kind of discussion is really key to solving it, and not keeping it to a special group of people.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Heather kind of led right into this wonderful question. So Heather, if you can kick us off on this one, how can we create a cycle of continuous improvement in our customer experience?
Yeah, so I actually track customer feedback in 3 ways. The first one is you want to make sure that you're very clear on taking actions that need to be taken right away. So if somebody didn't get a delivery, for example, you want to make sure that they get that delivery immediately. Then the second thing is to make sure that you're tracking them over a long period of time so that you can start to see trends and patterns. And when you see trends and patterns, that's when you really should be kicking off continuous improvement. And then the third one is you really want to monitor for any product or service opportunities. But when it comes to continuous improvement, there are often organizations within a company or other type of organization that do continuous improvement full-time, all time, every day. So if there is a group like that within your company or organization, it's really helpful to make good friends with them so that you can pull on their resources and learn how to do it well. There's no need to reinvent that wheel. It's been done many times, many ways.
Absolutely. Friends are very valuable. Van, would you like to add any insights onto creating that cycle of continuous improvement?
Yeah, there's probably so much I could say. It's almost overload. I think when I think of continuous improvement, I think of most normal relationships that people have with each other. Like every relationship changes, every relationship improves or degrades. And I think that just the basic fundamentals of keeping things honest and keeping them headed towards metrics and objectives that everyone can agree to is just a healthy way to look at continuous improvement or any sort of, in any sort of relationship. Now, am I going to go and suggest OKRs with my wife? Probably not. But it is something that within the business world we do to keep things healthy and honest.
Yeah, and I like that point that you drove in. It's whatever the objectives and metrics that everyone agrees to. Not always an
Right.
easy task, but extremely important. Jason, would you like to add anything about the cycle of continuous improvement?
Yeah, just a brief note. They covered a lot of the great points. Sometimes companies are not built with that continuous improvement model in mind. So sometimes you may actually have to advocate for a process that is driven with that principle in mind. I've had to do that several times where you have to bake kind of user experience into the mindset of the stakeholders at AI companies. So it's not always just about it actually being there once you come in there. So like sometimes you have to prove that there's a reason to put more money or budget or backing into certain elements that could actually bring the components into your company that can build on or learn from past mistakes. And then from the UX side, it's all process driven. I'm going to sound like a broken clock, where you have to have a process or a format or system that helps you improve constantly.
Awesome. And Jason, just a quick follow-up question. So what would be your number one tip, since you've gone through this, on actually getting stakeholders to buy into getting this continuous improvement baked in?
Honesty, transparency, and empathy. You have to understand who you're speaking to. So for example, when I was at CoStar Group, for the 4 years that I was there, we transformed the entire UX process completely. But first, first I started with having to kind of figure out what the core problems were and figure out that it came from an internal source, which was lack of understanding from the higher ups, pushing down design queries that didn't really make sense for our customer, and then like understanding their language and how to talk to them. So a lot of times in finance and in real estate, you have to understand that they're very data driven. So as long as you could back up your points with data that helps out the bottom line in some sort of way, just understanding their language helped us get the leeway and autonomy over our process to give them exactly what they needed for a better human-centered or user experience overall for their products.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight. And we do have a question from the audience specifically for Van. Is there a process like the 5 whys used for root causes of outages to get the root of the customer negative experience issue?
The 5 whys is great. I've also used something similar called abstraction laddering. Anything that satisfies that the team has dug down as deep as they could have is really great. And first, I think you need a really great team that communicates well and that doesn't step on each other's toes, or perhaps knows how to step on each other's toes. And then you get to the bottom of things that maybe some folks have been unable to see because of organizational differences in the past. But yeah, it really is about the conversation, and I'm very much about, the relationship between the people asking the questions opposed to the method of asking the questions, because the internet is totally littered with how to do that.
Thank you so much, Van. Appreciate it. And so we're talking about all these process improvements and really how to take that feedback of a negative customer experience. And so for our next question, what can CX leaders do about negativity bias, which is the fact that people focus more on those negative experiences than the positive ones? And Van, if you would just like to continue and kick this one off.
I think it's just human nature to really remember being hurt versus feeling good about something so that you're not hurt again. That kind of thing, you almost can't get around that. But, there are ways also to talk to people one-on-one and draw out the positives, because they may be pushing them aside. They may be just looking for those dangers in everyday life and everyday moving around and buying things. And they don't really realize how smooth some things are. And so that's where I always advocate for a really good qualitative interview, really understanding your customers on the level of like what they're thinking, doing, and feeling about all different types of situations. And, there's even things in some people's days that happened that colored their experience around a business. So, we have to be cognizant of that, because sometimes it's not all the business's fault that they have a bad experience. It could have just been a second glitch in page loading, and it ruined somebody's day because everything else went wrong. So, we have to see the human side of it.
Thank you, Van. It's a very good call out. You never know what's going on outside of that interaction with your company. Jason, would you like to add anything here?
Not too much. I mean, he covered it well. I mean, this is part of human psychology. People tend to recall insults more than praise. They react really strongly to like negative stimulus. So it's one of those things where you're never going to get past it, but you have to just approach it with the optimistic mindset and find the positive in it and turn those negatives into a positive over time, because you're never going to be able to please every customer. You're never going to be able to be happy 100% of the time. So just accepting that fact and working from it, and not letting that negative flow of, I guess, feedback bog you down. Instead, use it as a motivation. And there's a great book called Happy Pocket Full of Money if people have a difficult time getting into that positive thinking space.
Awesome. I love that we turn it all into a positive. Heather, anything to add?
Yeah, actually, Jason just reminded me there's another great book in this space called Hug Your Haters by Jay Baer. If you haven't come across Jay, he's a fantastic speaker, by the way. But yeah, that book is a great thing. One of the things that I came across, I was lucky enough to have a pretty significant data volume in one of my roles. And we were able to show that across different regions of the globe, with data. We were actually able to segment it out and show that certain parts of the world were more likely to be negative than other parts of the world. So that helped us kind of temper a little bit leadership's gut reaction to, oh my God, the sky is falling. No, the sky isn't falling. It's just that particular country is never going to give you more than a 6 on an NPS scale, right? So, so it's not the end of the world. And then I think the other thing, like Van said, is to make sure that you've got a really good balance of qualitative and quantitative research. You've got to have both, because what people say and how they say it may be tempered by that most recent interaction, but overall, their interactions might be neutral to positive, but they remember that negative experience. So I think it's important to make that clear to leadership that that is a human bias. Anytime you're reporting out on results, say, hey guys, just remember, people tend to remember the negative. And then you want to make sure that you show things in as data-driven a way as possible to try and not minimize, but put into balance those negative responses.
That's kind of awesome, Heather. May I just follow up with a quick?
Sure.
I've also found, working on different teams, one of the teams had a customer satisfaction survey after a regular flow. There was one state in the union in America that always give us low NPS, no matter when we ran it, how we ran it. They always it was always lower, and it was the strangest thing. And don't know what that says culturally about the state. Maybe it's only a select group of people, but that's very hard to be assured of. But it was just very, very strange that there are some cultural shifts in how people perhaps view an institution, and they're just never going to give you a thumbs up, even if it was actually a good experience. So again, there's so much qualitative behind somebody rating something in a certain way. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and I think that just feeds into that takeaway of really understanding your customers, and part of that is demographics and culture. So great call out there. So we've talked about the human aspect of negative customer experience, but what do you think the role of automation is doing in preventing and mitigating negative customer experiences? Jason, if you'd like to start this one.
Yeah. Oh man. I believe that automating a lot of your processes can help you not be overwhelmed, kind of manage the flow and the intake, and be able to kind of parse out what you're dealing with. It definitely helps streamline a lot of the processes. It makes them more efficient, and it reduces the likelihood of errors and delays, so that you can just get your information right in front of you and figure out what you're working with. There's also personalization options, to where you can kind of get, like she had previously noted, more of your demographics, and to kind of see what your users are choosing, or kind of how they're trying to personalize your application or our product, and that could, and you can actually leverage that in the future to see, oh, all right, this person needs this type of preference or this type of information, and that can help you build out a better model in the future. It can help you identify potential issues, and then things like chatbots can kind of help you not have to be overloaded on the customer service side.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Heather, any other insights for using automation to prevent and mitigate negative customer experiences?
Yeah, again, agree with Jason. I think about automation in two buckets. There's back-end automation, and I think you should triple down on back-end automation. As much as you can do that, do it. And then there's front-end automation. And with that, things like chatbots, for example, or AI-assisted chat. I think you have to be a little bit cautious, because not every customer segment wants to interact that way. But what I love about it is, for the segments that will adopt it and who are willing to do it, it does free up your agents to deal with things that are more complex, might need the human touch. It might just be a person that maybe they're a little older and they just don't want to deal with a bot. It scares them for some reason. So it frees up your people, so you can scale much more quickly if you've got that automation happening, but you can still have people available to have that human touch where it's needed. And that's where I love our automation systems, because we've been able to free up our people to do the more interesting stuff, which frankly has driven our attrition down pretty dramatically, because they're, what's my order status is no longer a call that they're having to take. The bot can handle that 85-90% of the time. And then they're taking things like, this thing is broken, can you please help me fix it?
Right. And honestly, when you have more engaged customer representatives as well, they're going to give a better experience for those that do need to contact them. So nice call out there. Van, would you like to add anything?
The answers have been pretty comprehensive. I can't think of a thing in the future that probably won't be automated within the next 10, 15 years. So it's scary, but in some ways promising.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel that. Awesome. Well, next question here is, how can we get response times for addressing complaints down without sacrificing that side of quality? Heather, if you'd like to start us on.
I think our previous conversation is really relevant here. Automation is a lot of it, right? If you can automate the simple stuff, what is my order status? When will my my item arrive for shipping? All those kind of basic, simple things that frees your people up so that you can do more training time with them, more coaching time, that kind of stuff, I think is really helpful when it comes to quality. It also, my observation is, the better trained someone is, the more quickly they are able to resolve something. They're more likely to get it right the first time. We look at response time, but I personally am more concerned with first time right. I don't want that person to have to call back in 2, 3, 4 times and getting them off the phone quick is great, but if you didn't solve their issue, that's not a win. So we look at response time plus, did you get it right the first time?
Great, absolutely. Van, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I was thinking, even when hearing the question, it's all about quality. Like, I think we put too much emphasis on getting things fast versus getting them right. And that's exactly what Heather was saying.
Awesome. Definitely. I feel like everybody wants to get it right the first time, especially we've all been consumers, right? So good call out there. Jason, would you like to add?
I mean, she covered most of it. I'll double down and automate as much of the process as possible. They are right. I've been studying a lot of the AI field and what's going on with open AI, and there's not going to be a single process involved in this that's not going to be automated or helped by automation itself in the future. But you can learn from the past as well by just going back and listening to all the complaints, determining what actions that you took and how it worked, and then learning from the past while automating the future. And that's kind of a pretty good balance there.
Great, absolutely. And I do agree. Everything's going to be automated in the future at some point. Awesome. Well, so how do you help your customer contact team go off script when they need to have a more authentic conversation with a customer when they do call in on a process that's not automated? Sorry, well, Van, are you okay kicking us off on this one?
Sure. I probably said it way too much, but it's about the relationship. I think everybody can identify with things going wrong. And as soon as that person on the phone makes clear that they've been in the other person's shoes, if they indeed have, I think that's a more human conversation. And I don't think there's anyone working in any phone center that could ever say, well, something like this hasn't happened to me. And when I've had problems with companies, they apologize and sometimes over apologize, and that's great. But that also can be almost dismissive, hearing an apology way too much and kind of just as a way to quiet somebody down from talking. So I think listening is also super important.
Absolutely. And I think that's come up quite recently, a lot of just people apologizing and not moving to action. One of my favorite sayings I tell my teams are, everything you say should be a step to resolution. So I definitely align with that, Van. Jason, Would you like to add your side to this, Jason?
Yeah, sure. I've had experience dealing with creating user testing scripts. So actually even creating the script and then being able to go off of my own script is something that I've had experience with in building wireframes or certain prototypes of our products, and then having to actually talk to our user, which is our end customer, and then pick their brain as to why they made certain decisions or choices and what they're looking for. And then a lot of times when it comes to human interaction, the spontaneity is where you find some of the best truths, because you're making your script based off of a lot of assumptions that you think that they'll fall into. But one of the things that I learned, for example, when I was at Stride Learning, I was rebuilding an education platform, especially since COVID made the digital education boom happen. I was able to get FaceTime with a lot of customers, from third graders to fifth graders, all the way up to admins that are a lot older. So I was able to learn a lot about what the problems were that they had previously faced and what we were trying to gain through modernization of this type of platform. And you have to be able to, like Van said, understand what your relationship is with the customer as well as with the product and how they use it day to day. And then during conversation, you're human. A lot will come up that you can learn from. You just have to be receptive and open to those spontaneous moments and being able to read the other person.
Absolutely. And definitely focusing on design. I feel like you have to go off script quite a bit. Is that right?
All the time.
Awesome. You're a pro now. Heather, would you like to add anything here?
Yeah, I think I love Jason's perspective and Van's as well, but that the whole concept of maybe there isn't a script, right? I think one of the things that we do when we have customer service agents is we typically like to give them a little bit more structure because the role does tend to be more structured, but it is important to help people understand when is it okay to go off script and when is it not. And so that's one of the things that we have sort of guidelines for empowerment so that it doesn't go crazy, but and it makes people feel more comfortable because they know they're not going to get yelled at later, right? Because they said something goofy. But I do love the idea of giving people some empowerment and some scope for creativity in those solutions. We've actually had some really cool product ideas actually come out of a couple of calls that where somebody did go off script and was kind of just frankly having a design session with a customer on the phone, which is pretty neat when we listen to it later. So, I think when you have people, when you've automated enough that they're freed up enough that they can have those conversations, it becomes less about the time, less about the script, more about what do we really need to do to help this particular customer.
Absolutely. And it sounds like how you're describing it too, is that they're going to feel more comfortable because they have the backing of management, kind of that
Yes.
freedom to say, okay, we're going to trust you. We're going to have your back with going off script, which I think is huge.
Yeah. And we've actually been very explicit about that and said, here's your guardrails. You can go to here. Above that, you got to call for help.
I like that. It's like driving on a highway, right? You
Yeah.
got to have those rails so you don't go off. Awesome. Well, this is probably one of my favorite questions for everybody. So everyone has encountered, as a customer, companies that don't actually care what kind of customer experience they're offering. So we've all tangled with companies that didn't seem to care about keeping our business. So what are some things leaders can do to encourage customer experience professionals to care about what kind of experience they're offering? And I'll have Jason, why don't you kick this one off?
All right. So I do believe we all have had those experiences where you're dealing with somebody and all they really care about is the money or the bottom line. As long as that's met, they could have the most unhappy customer base or unhappy user base. But what I would counter that with is that there's a lot of companies that have gone under because of that, or now we're in a space where it's not as labor or time or resource intensive to create a competitor, especially with automation and all these tool sets. Somebody can look at your business model and recreate it from home now. and not have to worry about having tons of investors. So for like a stakeholder view, I would say that unless you dominate your market and have all the market share, that's when you're in a position of kind of being apathetic about having a great customer experience. Now, some are okay with that, but what I've learned is that you could combat that with understanding that stakeholders, once again, their bottom line is more money. If you can sell them that this customer experience, that your bottom line will be a benefit to you to improve your customer experience, and you could show case studies and user studies about how making your customers happy will actually be a better revenue generation, or just better for the ecosystem of this market, then you can kind of slowly gain their trust in that fact that it won't cost too much to fix smaller problems. And once that ball starts rolling, you can get more momentum into starting to build design systems and certain things like that to make the overall process better for both teams. Because one thing I've noticed is that when a company exists like that, they don't just treat their customers that way. A lot of times they treat their staff and employees that way too. They burn them out, grind, churn them to the point where both sides are unhappy. So once you start fixing the problem with customer happiness, a lot of times it reflects back internally too.
Yeah, great. And it sounds like a great customer experience is a differentiator. So great call out there. Heather, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, again, totally agree with Jason. At one of my previous assignments, I actually owned employee experience and customer experience for that very reason. There is definitely a relationship between the two. I wanted to talk, though, about a company that I consulted at where the market was driven by a sort of least bad scenario. So as long as you were better than the worst guy in that market, it was considered, we don't care, we don't want to invest one more dollar. And what I did to convince them that least bad was not the way to go was exactly what Jason was just talking about. We did some research. We showed how in other markets, so because we couldn't prove it in that market yet, when there was a similar scenario, when they put just 1% of revenue towards CX improvements, they saw a 6% on their bottom line. Now, that's going to vary a little bit by industry, but these use cases, these case studies exist. And so that kind of thing can be very attractive to a leadership team. If you can improve things with a very small investment, I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? And like you said, Crystal, it's a differentiator in a lot of markets. So many companies and entire market segments do not care about the customer experience. If you're the only one who does, market the heck out of that.
Absolutely. And when you have that good ROI to show leadership, you're going to get better buy-in as well. So that I really liked that. Thank you. Van, would you like to add anything?
I think both Jason and Heather covered it really well. Companies like that don't really stay in business very long. And how would they feel if they weren't cared about? Where would they send their money? And, I kind of often feel like that by some products I receive online, where it's like, email us questions, and you just never hear a response. So yeah, the fly by night companies, they should fly by night, and they'll be gone soon.
Yes, absolutely agreed. Well, that's all of our main panel questions. We do have a few questions from the audience in our last few minutes here. So if you would like to take it, I'll let you all just jump in. So the question here is there a point where the consumer is no longer right if they continue to be displeased with your actions?
I had a really interesting scenario with this many years ago. It was with someone in the Middle East, and they were unhappy because we wouldn't do something that was breaking the law. And I'm not going to talk about what it was because it would not be great. But we ended up taking it to a CEO level management review to say, look, we really just want to exclude this specific contact at this specific customer from the feedback system because they keep saying this over and over again. It's illegal. We're not going to do it. Like, it's just not fair to the team to ding them on this. So I think yes, it can happen, but that's in 12, 15 years of doing this, I've had to do that once. So it should definitely be an exception, not the rule. I would say if you have one customer who's super unhappy, you can probably ignore that. If you have many customers who are continuing to come back and be displeased, I would argue that maybe you're not listening the way you ought to be listening.
Thank you. Van or Jason, either of you want to jump in on this?
I think she covered it pretty well.
Yeah, you can find trolls anywhere, right? And you know that could be somebody else's, a competitor's business strategy to just be running you, making sure your customer care team runs around in circles for a day, and that is, you know, that's no good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, to piggyback a little bit on Heather, having good terms of use and setting the right customer expectations as early as possible, I think kind of helps mitigate that as well and sets those standards. And so we do also have a question specifically for Jason. Can you repeat the name of the book you recommended?
Oh, sure. It's called A Happy Pocket Full of Money by David Cameron. And there's also another one called The Optimist Creed. It's great ways to flip a lot of your perspective and experiences from a potential negative into a positive, and about living in the now, and that you're always in control of the infinite now.
Thank you so much. And we have a little under 4 minutes left. Next question here is, what recommendations do you have for small businesses with limited resources to better address negative feedback?
If I'm assuming this is a social media use case, don't get into too many channels if you don't have the people to support them, would be my first recommendation there. It's really hard to support. Even large companies have trouble dealing with the volume of social media. Automate as much as you can, but don't do those stupid canned responses. You know, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. No, don't do that. But say something meaningful that relates to what they've said.
That was my first thought as well. Try to isolate where you're getting your feedback from, whether it's Google or it's Twitter or it's someplace that's accessible to you, so you can do it, you know, before you go to sleep at night, because we all know startups, nobody sleeps for more than 4 hours a night.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I was just reiterating what you had said, Heather.
And my husband actually has a startup. There are lots of free or nearly free tools out there to help you automate a lot of that as a small, like 2 people business.
And then another quick way, is if you're a design agency, you could actually take like a big piece of customer feedback that's negative and turn it into a case study on how you have flipped a situation from a bad into a good, and how your design affected that, as a way to leverage that for content, especially for small businesses. You're looking to create case studies. So that could be a great way to get a case study done.
It's a great idea.
Great call out. And just quick follow-up question. I know we just have a minute left here. Vin and Heather, with limited social media channels, are you concerned at all about a lack of data or limiting your consumer pool that you're getting feedback on?
No.
Great answer.
Awesome. I know we only have 1 minute left. There was one more question, and so I think I will direct this here. What are your recommendations or thoughts on getting feedback during development and providing training to CX to use your product and handling those edge case scenarios? So if the first person who wants to jump in, I'll let you kind of take that one since we're short on time.
Jason's not going to take it. Okay. I actually do have some thoughts on this. I did user testing for a long time. And I think the thing that I've often seen that is the root cause of this problem is not having a broad enough testing base. If the people doing the testing are the people who wrote the software, they know how it's supposed to work. You need people who can pass what I call the grandmother test. If you can sit down with your grandmother and explain how it works and she gets it, and she's presumably not a technical person, then it's probably tested enough, right? So make sure that you've got a broad testing base. I don't know. I bet Jason has thoughts on this though.
No, well, we are at time. So Heather, Jason, Van, thank you so much for just offering your insights and just providing a great customer experience. Michael, thank you so much for emceeing, and I will throw it back to you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And to Jason, Heather, and Van, this was truly an insightful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today for a fantastic discussion. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you, everyone.